Welcome to Civics. Now, I've been telling y'all all school year that we're gonna be in Civics after Christmas, so that's where we're gonna be in now. And it's really an exciting time to be taking Civics because there's so much going on in our country. It's a really good example of things both that the founding fathers intended and things that they didn't intend in terms of how our government should run. We've got good examples this right now and last year of impeachment. We got examples of what it means for really important elections for the House and the Senate. We have examples of what happens with the transfer of power, with the inauguration, and all this kind of stuff. So it's a really important time in our country, and it's a great time to be talking about civics because of that. So we're going to be in civics, and civics is basically how our government works, how the founding fathers intended for it to work, what the role of government is, and then some of the debates between what's important between state government and federal government, who should have more power, should the state government have the same or equal power to the federal government, and we'll kind of get into all that kind of stuff when we talk about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists and all that. We're also going to talk about important figures that play an important role in our government. Of course, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and John Adams and people like that. And we're going to discuss a little about the history, the three main branches of government, and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to discuss a lot of things in these videos and in class. So just make sure that you pay attention because there's a lot going on. So here's the standards and objectives for Chapter 1, Section 1. Alabama Standard 7.1, compare influences of ancient Greece, the Roman Republic, the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Magna Carta, federalism, the Mayflower Compact, the English Bill of Rights, the House of Burgesses, and the Petition of Rights on the Government of the United States. Now, you may be thinking, whoa, that's a lot of stuff that we're going to be covering. We're not going to cover all this in this chapter. This is just a standard of some of the things we need to discuss in terms of the Greek and Roman, how it affects our laws and our government today, the Judeo-Christian tradition, and how the Christian views have affected our government, the Magna Carta, which was it's part of European history, but it really helped set the precedent for how our government was set up, and then a number of other things. We're going to discuss all these things over the course of civics, but just not in this section and not in this chapter. It'll be kind of spread out. The objectives, we're going to analyze what civics is and the role it plays in society. We're also going to describe the origins of democracy and evaluate the importance of the government in our everyday lives. So these are going to be the three main topics we're going to discuss in this section. So to start off with, what is civics? Civics is the study of the rights and duties of citizens. So civics is your right and your duty as a U.S. citizen. When you are a citizen, civics applies to you. And citizenship goes back 2,500 years to ancient Greek and Rome and was limited to men that own property. Traditionally, that's what it was historically set up as. Even early on in our country, it was typically white men that owned property that were considered to be the citizens or the people that had a right or a duty in the government. Because, see, let's break that definition of civics down. Civics is the study of the rights and the duties of citizens. If you have no rights, if you have no responsibilities or duties, then it doesn't apply to you. And this is the case early on with women, African Americans, people that weren't citizens. They didn't have any rights. They didn't have any responsibilities in the government. The men that were white handled all of it. And that goes back to the Greek and Roman, where it was set up the same way. In Greece and Rome, it was men, not typically white men, because this was a Mediterranean area, so it wasn't really like, what we typically consider white people, but it was the men, usually men that owned property, so you had to have a little bit of money. If you were a poor man, You really didn't have any authority or power. And that goes on into the early U.S. history as well. You had to own property to do this also. And then that kind of goes into, the fact that African Americans are slaves. There were some free African Americans that did own property, but for the most part, slaves couldn't own property. A lot of women didn't own property. It was the men that owned property. So, that kind of applies then also. Citizens are people that have certain rights and duties. So again, if we look at the definition of civics, as the study of the rights and duties of citizens, then citizens are people that have certain rights and duties that we study in civics. And so a right or a duty just means, you hear people saying, they're trying to take away my rights and things like that. Your rights are what's in the Constitution. Your rights are what's given to you by the government to say, you know what, the government cannot take these things away from you. And that goes into the First Amendment with free speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of petition to government, things like that. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, that goes on to the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. So the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which are the Reconstruction Amendments, which gives African Americans their freedom in slavery. It gives African American men the right to vote, and it gives them the rights as citizens. And so that is our rights that the government can't take away. You hear the Constitution brought up a lot. We're going to talk about in this class. The Constitution is the central part of our government. Citizenship means more than just being the member of a country. It's not like you have a membership card. That citizenship means a lot more than that. It means that you agree to a certain set of rules that you follow, and they expect protection from the government in return. Let me make this simple. As a citizen, you agree to follow the laws, and in return, you expect the government to protect you with the laws. So there's the reason why there's a punishment if you break the law, because as a citizen, you are agreeing to follow the laws of the land. Now, most of us, myself included, and most of y'all, there are probably some, or there may be some that have come to the country and went through the whole process of becoming a citizen and all that kind of stuff. But most of us are naturalized in this country. We're born in this country, so we aren't naturalized. Naturalized is where you go through the process of becoming a citizen. And so you are born into this country, so you don't really have to go through the same things that people that go through the process of naturalization do. The idea that you have to take an oath of naturalization, that you have to pass a civics test to become a citizen, all that kind of stuff that we're going to discuss later on, you don't have to do. But whether you made a decision or not to become a member of this country, and you were just born here, you still agree to follow the laws. You still agree to follow the rules. And if you don't, there's punishment. And that punishment is to protect the other citizens. The reason why that if you're driving 100 miles an hour through the middle of Phil Campbell, and if they arrest you, you will definitely lose your license. But if they arrest you and put you in jail for that, for reckless endangerment or reckless driving or anything like that, they're doing it to protect the people that may get run over by you in the middle of town. So that's the idea. What I always say in civics is that you lose your constitutional rights, like your freedom of speech and things like that, if you infringe on the rights of others. So they take away your freedom by putting you in jail because you're taking away the civic rights of other people. So you agree to follow the laws, and in return, you expect the government to protect you. Citizenship means being involved in the community. It means taking a part. It means voting. It means going out here and campaigning for candidates, what's called canvassing. It means going out here and speaking your mind about things through peaceful protest that you disagree with. It means calling your congressman and or congresswoman and telling them, look, I don't like what's going on. I don't want you to vote for this. And you have the right to get involved and say something, even at y'all's age, at 12, 13 years old. You still have a voice. Even though you can't vote yet, you still have a voice, and it's important that you get involved and pay attention to what's going on in the world. It's the reason why I get you to watch CNN 10. As I say all the time, I don't do it just to kill 10 minutes of class. I do it because I want you to know what's going on in the world. I want you to know what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. I want you to know what's happening in North Korea and what the latest technology is. They're coming out with. What's going on in the world of sports, things like that. I want you to know these things to stay informed, and we're going to get into that when we get into the rights of citizens. One of them is to be informed. Or their responsibilities. It's not a duty, but it's a responsibility that you're an informed citizen. There's a lot of non-informed citizens, and you see that on Facebook right now. People that are commenting stuff and writing stuff on social media and saying things that just doesn't make sense because they don't know. They're not informed, so they don't know what's going on. They just believe what someone or the media or whatever has told them. So, it means being involved in your community. Now, government is the ruling authority for a community. Government is what rules over that community. Now, governments are done in a number of different ways. You have, of course, the federal government, which is the United States government, which is over the United States. You also break that down into state governments. We have a governor named Kay Ivey. She is the leader of our state. She rules over the state of Alabama, which is a community as well. Then when you break it down even more, looking at like Phil Campbell, for example, we have a mayor. The mayor is Mike McQuarrie, and he is the mayor of Phil Campbell. So that means he don't necessarily rule over Phil Campbell. He makes decisions that affect Phil Campbell. And so he has authority over a community. So a community can be a large government or a large community or a small community. It can also be other things, such as for the example of the State Board of Education is ran by Superintendent Dr. Eric Mackey. Under that is we have the county level where you have Mr. Greg Hamilton, which is our superintendent for Franklin County, and then you have Mr. Riddle, which is the principal of Phil Campbell. So our community of Phil Campbell, we have Mr. Riddle that's over the school, Mr. Hamilton that's over the county, and Dr. Mackey, which is over the state. So communities can be a number of different things. It can be online communities, whatever. That is the government. They set the rules. They police it and make sure that people are following the rules. People have always founded governments, even in hunting-gathering societies. And we'll talk about hunter-gatherers a little bit next year, but this is just a group of people that would hunt and gather to survive. They would travel around. They would hunt animals. They didn't really build houses or farm or anything like that. That wouldn't come till later. But even then, they would say, "You're the strongest warrior. You lead us." Thomas Hobbes in the 1600s believed that life without government would be, quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So Thomas Hobbes had a high view of the role government played in our society. And you look at this, and we'll get into it next year in history. And this happens a lot in Chinese history, where they overthrow the government, and then there's nobody in power, so all the different little lords, the people that had land here and here and here and here, would start fighting to take over as the next leader. And so, when there's no organized government, it becomes very nasty, and people fight for everything. What would sports look like with no leadership or rules? That's similar to how the government will work. If there was no rules or leaders in sports, it'd be chaotic. No one knows what's going on. The same applies to no laws, leaders, and people to enforce those laws. So let's look at sports, for example. Say you go to play say you're playing football, and you show up on the football field and you're ready to start playing, and you line up, getting ready to start the play, and the person across from you just reaches over and punches you in the face, and no penalties called. No one does anything about it. What's going to happen? You're probably going to punch them back, and it's going to lead to a brawl in the middle of the field. And if no one's there to enforce the rules, you're not going to be able to continue on with the game. Not only that, but how many times does a referee determine the outcome of a game? How many times does a blown call or a penalty determine an outcome of a game that the referee assign? You know as good as I do that if it was between those two teams, they couldn't come to a decision. Look at our government right now. You have Donald Trump on one side and Joe Biden on the other. And even now, Trump is starting to agree to relinquish his powers. But for a long time, you didn't really know if either side was going to concede if the other one won. And so, you've got to have rules. You've got to have leadership. You've got to have things in play. And that's where the U.S. Constitution comes in. Government can help all of us to get things we need to survive, including money, protection, organization. Now, this is really good right now also because there's a number of things going on in our country right now that's really not unprecedented, but it's things that are specific because of COVID. The COVID CARES money, the money that was given out to help small businesses to keep going, the money that's given out to people as stimulus checks. These are things the government has provided. But also people that get food stamps, WIC, people that get government housing, things like that. This all comes from the government because the government is supposed to help people in times of need to help them survive. Also, it gives us protection in the form of the military, police forces, things like that. And organization, how to deal with the transfer of power, how to deal with a threat from a world leader or something like that. This is all an important part. Government serves many functions and offers many services. It gives a plan and a vision for the future. The government says, this is the direction we need to go in. Government keeps things running smoothly in theory. Now, you're going to hear me say a lot in theory because a lot of the government is experiencing some issues. And some of it doesn't run the way that it's supposed to or the way the founding fathers meant for it to. So in theory, government keeps things running smooth. Now, does it always work that way? No. But in theory, that's the role of the government. It's impossible to avoid conflict when something happens. There needs to be a non-biased source to delegate and find the truth. The purpose of laws is to set the rules so people know what's right and wrong, and the government has the power to set and enforce laws in society. And we'll get into all that as we get into the three branches of government, what the role of each of them are. But the government makes laws. And when they make the laws, that's what determines if people goes to jail or not. And so if you break the law set by the government, and it's got to go through a process where Congress has to bring it up as a bill, they have to vote on it, it has to pass both houses of Congress, the president has a chance to veto it. So there's a big process to turn a bill into a law. They don't just say, let's make this a law real quick. But when it becomes a law, that's when it becomes a crime if you break that law. Governments create libraries, schools, hospitals, parks, recreational centers. These are just some of the services the government provides. Local communities set up fire departments, ambulance services, helping families that fall in hard times with food, aid, or cash. Again, this is where government aid comes in through food stamps or government housing or any of those other kind of programs that the government offers. Is for families that fall on hard times. And so these are just some of the services that the government provides. Public policy is a course of government action to achieve community goals. So public policy is the action taken by the government to achieve the goals set for the community, whatever they may be. A budget is a plan for collecting and spending money. Now, budgets are very important, not just from the government standpoint, but me and my wife, we set a budget for us. If we get money from a paycheck or whatever, we don't just go out and say, hey, we just made this much money, let's go spend it all. You have to budget it. You have to pay bills. You have to do other things. And so in the same way, the government has to do that. The government collects money through taxes and other sources. And they have to budget, okay, this much money needs to go towards the military. This much needs to go towards social programs. This much needs to go towards schools. This much needs to go towards roads. This much needs to go towards paying employees. They have to budget out the money. And every year they have to come up with a new budget and kind of talk about, okay, well, based on this, what are we going to change and things like that. Not to mention deal with the relationships and connections with foreign countries. The highest level in the U.S. government is the national government. And the national government makes the laws and enforces them. State and local government can't go above the laws that the national government makes. So when the federal government makes a law, the state and local government can't say, don't worry about that law. You ain't got to do that in my state. But they can pass state laws that don't go against the federal laws. And a lot of things the government just kind of leaves out there for the states to decide. One area that right now is legalization of marijuana. There's a number of states that have legalized marijuana. There's a number of states that have not. That's being left up to the states. So the federal government or the national government is the highest level. Under that is the state government. Under that is the local governments, like the mayors, counties, things like that. Just a couple of types of governments. A dictatorship, and we talked about this in geography a little bit, but a dictatorship is a government controlled by one person or a small group of people. They control everything. In a democracy, it's a government in which the people rule. And I mean, the people rule. I mean, like, the people make the laws. The people assign leaders. Because, see, the way our government is set up to run, in theory, is that we vote for the government that represents us. The idea is whoever gets more votes, that is the will of the people, that person rules over someone else. So that person governs over someone else. So that person assumes a position of authority. So that way, the government is represented by the majority. The laws that are passed by the government are passed by that government that's supposed to represent the people. Now, it doesn't always represent your views, but it is supposed to represent the people, and that's what democracy is. The foundations of democracy are ancient Greece 2,500 years ago. And this, you get looking into it with Solon. He kind of created citizenship with his laws. Then you get looking at like Callisthenes and some of these people that are important in the founding of democracy, kind of let the people have a voice. Direct democracy is a form of government where people's vote has a direct impact. A direct democracy is what was in ancient Greece. For example, one way they would vote is they would have 3 baskets. One basket would have white rocks, one basket would have black rocks, and one would be empty. They would say, we're going to vote on this. And they would vote on everything. If they was going to go to war, what a new law should have been. They said, if you want to vote yes on this, get a white rock and put it in the basket. If you want to vote no, get a black rock and put it in the basket. And then they would count all the rocks at the end to determine which side won. That's direct democracy. You vote directly for something. And a representative democracy, which is what we have, this is a republic. And you hear all people say, we don't have a democracy, we have a republic. Well, yes, but a republic is a representative democracy. In a representative democracy, you vote for people to represent you in the government. So we vote for people to represent us. The United States is the oldest representative democracy in the world. And there's some that have been founded since the founding of our government. And like, for example, Rome had a republic, but it didn't last. It turned into the Roman Empire. So it's the oldest that's still continuing to go. And so that's the difference between a direct democracy and a representative democracy. Direct democracy, you vote on everything. Representative democracy, you vote for people that make the laws. You vote for people that decide if we go to war. You vote for people to make decisions for us. Abraham Lincoln described our democracy as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And it's been commonly described by that in a number of sources throughout history. Democracies participate in elections. The idea of a fair election is the idea that everyone's vote counts equally. Again, this is in theory, because there are certain communities that aren't represented as much. There's not as much of a push to get people to vote in certain communities. There are certain communities that they push people to vote even more. But the idea is that everybody's vote counts equally. I get one vote. My wife gets one vote. Mr. Riddle gets one vote. Everybody that goes and votes gets one vote, and that vote adds to the number. The legal requirement you have to be a minimum today. For example, you have to be 18 to vote. And I just jumbled all that up, but you have to be 18 years old to vote, and that is a legal requirement. At one point, it was 21, but there was a constitutional amendment passed to lower the age to 18. Political parties are a group of individuals with common interests who organize to support a certain candidate. So this is individuals who work together to push a certain candidate. The two major political parties are Republicans and Democrats. And so these are the two main political parties. The idea about democratic votes is that you vote for the candidate that you think most represents you. When you go to vote, and I'll get on this as I go, when you go to vote, you vote for the candidate that you want to represent you, not who someone else tells you to vote. But you look at what this person believes, what they stand for, what they're going to do, and you say, hey, I like that person. I'm going to vote for them. I like what they stand for. I'm going to vote for them. That's the idea of the democratic system. In fact, political parties was never meant to be a part of it. George Washington made the point that a political party system could be detrimental to our government and that people would vote for the party and not the candidate. And he turned out to be pretty right about that. Majority rule is the person with the most support wins the election. This is done a number of different ways. Of course, this varies, as is this is the last election. The 2020 election, all the numbers haven't come in yet, so I haven't changed the PowerPoint slide, so we're still going with the Clinton-Trump one. But in the 2016 election, Clinton and Trump, Clinton won the popular vote, but Trump won the electoral vote. You see this here. In the 2016 election, you see that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. That means the number of actual votes. But this is the electoral map. I'm not going to get into this right now, but this is how we determine our president. There are you need to get 270 of all these numbers you see on this map in order to win. And I'll get into this a little bit later on. But Trump won because of the electoral map, not the popular vote. But I'll get into some of that a little bit later on. So that brings us to the end of section 1. And kind of gives you a little bit of idea about what civics is. So we will continue that in the next